Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is a roaring with good reviews and bananas reactions to the new film by director Wes Ball. So I thought we'd take a look at where the Maniacal Monkey movie franchise began. Published in 1963 by noted French author and former military operative Pierre Boulle, La Planète des Singes. The original novel told a philosophical and satirical story about talking apes that was published under the title Monkey Planet in the United Kingdom. However, the story did not gain traction in public consciousness until it was adapted into a feature film in 1968 starring Charlton Heston. Given how huge and storied the history of the Apes franchise is, the origin has become a story quite disparate and weathered, so much that people must know it for the film franchise that we all know and love over the book and author that it came from. To illustrate how monumental the Apes franchise has become from such a small and unpopular book at this moment in time, in 2024, we now have 5 in the original series spanning the 60s and 70s, a short-lived television series on CBS, as well as a just as short animated series at NBC. Then, sadly, Tim Burton made a reboot of Planet of the Apes starring Mark Wahlberg that thankfully got no sequel. Moving past that abomination of all cinema, we got possibly one of the greatest blockbuster trilogies of all time in the Matt Reeves, mostly directed trilogy of Apes films, starting with Dawn, which was directed by Rupert Wyatt, and ending with War. Now we're on to the film that just released, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, that is directed by Wes Ball, distancing himself from Matt Reeves and Andy Serkis's prolific story. Now, why all this background? We are not going to be talking about any of the movies today in depth, but I wanted to show how great an impact one single novel has had on culture as a whole, if you didn't already know, and why it's important to give props to the man who started it all, Pierre Boulle. It is quite likely you've never heard his name. Even if you're in literature/sci-fi nerd circles, it is quite possible his name never came up amongst the company of Edgar Rice Burroughs, H.G. Wells, Arthur C. Clarke, and Douglas Adams. So I guess this begs the question, who is Pierre Boulle? Pierre wrote Planet of the Apes in 1963, as well as writing Bridge on the River Kwai, which was adapted by David Lean in 1957. Okay, so we have this French author who wrote 2 books, adapted into classic films of old. Why have we never heard of him? I read an article by Hugh Schofield on BBC News detailing Boulle's life and career, which will be linked below. A recurring theme throughout Boulle's career is well-paid adaptation, while decently heavy changes made to the material at hand, at least in specific to the end. More so on the part of Apes, but partially on River Kwai. The biggest change to Planet of the Apes that I think is quite interesting to look at is this. In Boulle's original book, the story is told by 2 honeymooners holidaying in space who find a bottle containing a manuscript. It is by a French journalist who tells of his adventures on a planet run by monkeys, where the humans are the dumb animals. At the end of the account, the the journalist arrives back at Orly Airport in Paris, where he finds the staff are apes. And there is a kicker when we discover the two honeymooners are themselves chimpanzees. End quote. At the end of the day, both endings have the same thematic direction, but both endings deliver on a different thematic punch. What's the better ending is difficult for me to say because they're both so fascinating to me. The Statue of Liberty imagery being fabricated by the filmmakers and screenwriters, delivering on the twist in a more clearly visual fashion, which is what text-to-film adaptation is all about. There's an even bigger difference in a smaller detail, and it's this. In the book, the Planet of the Apes is not Earth, with a different twist of the theme than the film. Quote, in the film there is this sense of human responsibility. It is man that has led to the destruction of the planet. But the book is more a reflection on how all civilizations are doomed to die. There has been no human fault. It is just that the return to savagery will come about anyway. Everything perishes. End quote. There is a logical, a technical, pragmatic affectation to the way that Boulle wrote. Perhaps it came from his scientific background or his military training. He looked at apes in the zoo and saw the humanity within their eyes and perhaps the inhumanity within ours. He was a scientist by training. According to Loriot, there is a remorseless logic to his stories. In fact, he wrote the concluding page first and then worked backwards to construct the way to that conclusion. As a writer, I can't help but be fascinated by this Frenchman who told one of the most chilling, scathing stories about humanity and our destiny towards savagery. Yet he wrote such an emotional concept so tactilely and so pragmatically, just as an avid observer of our history and reenactment. Quote, on his deathbed, his last words to me and my wife were, I hope they will not forget me. End quote. It's hard for these last words not to move me to tears. I shudder to believe he might have been right. No, I won't let it be true. A fear I know all too well. We write to show we were here. Pierre. We were here. Just as the Statue of Liberty shows, despite the passage of time, that this is where once human society stood. This novel, this Planet of the Apes, this timeless story reminds me that you lived the way you loved, telling stories.